to my channel Grammar Tales. Learn English Grammar with Krish. So today we will continue with the active and passive voice. Alright, it is a part of the, or you can say a category of verbs. Alright, of the properties of verb voices. Fine. So in the we'll do a short recap before we proceed on. In the last class, what we did active and passive voice, and we did some sentences as examples to show how active voice can be converted to passive voice, right? So before we proceed with the topic, let's just do a short recap. So what we had learned that what is active voice? Active voice is what? When the sentence has a subject who is the doer, isn't it? So in a sentence there is a subject, an action, that is a verb, that the action that is performed by a subject, and there is an object, isn't it? So when the subject is the doer, or he does some action and that action is passed on to the object, or it may not be passed on also, but generally it is passed on to an object, and in such cases the verb in such cases is active. Alright, so in such a sentence is called an active sentence, or it is called an active voice. The sentence in which a verb is done by the doer, in such a sentence the voice is called the active voice. Okay, just if you remember, we had done an example that is Rama helps Hari. Say Rama helps Hari. Alright, so see here in this sentence, Rama is the subject. He is doing an action, isn't it? He is helping. This is the verb and this is the object. So Rama helps Hari. It is in the active voice. Why? Because the subject or the doer, the subject or the doer is performing the action on the object. Performing the action, isn't it? So this is the case of active voice. This verb helps is in the active voice. Fine. Now if I want to change this sentence into the passive voice, what will I do? This object will come here in place of the subject. And how am I going to write it? I will write Hari is helped by Rama. See, the sentence or the meaning of the sentence remains the same, isn't it? Hari is helped by Rama. We have just, what we have done is we have changed the structure of the sentence. Here Hari is the object, it comes in place of the subject, isn't it? It is an auxiliary or a helping verb. It is the to be verb, isn't it? And we have to add a preposition here, and the ed form of the verb is used. So this is in the passive voice. This is what? This is in the active voice, this sentence, and this is in the passive voice. Right? So this is what we had done about active and passive voice. Now see, when we are changing from the active to the passive, what we are doing? We are just flipping the sentence structure, or we are just changing the structure of the sentence, and hence we are adding an auxiliary verb or a helping verb and a preposition. Fine. I think this much you have understood. It is not any rocket science, so it is easy to understand. Now how are you going to determine when to use active and passive voice? Alright. When to use active and passive voice. Fine. Now see, in an active voice, what happens? When we speak a sentence or write a sentence in an active voice, we are generally saying it in a the sentence meaning that the sentence is conveying is generally strong. Fine. It is straightforward. Alright, you don't need to go around to understand the meaning. It conveys a strong and simple meaning. Fine. And it is not necessary just to make the sentence fancy or look very dramatic. You need to use the passive voice. Not necessary. Now it is always advisable that you use the active voice as much as possible. Fine. So I'll just write it down. It is always advisable to use the active voice as much as possible, because it conveys a clear meaning. You can easily understand when we are talking in the active voice. All right, it is generally displaying that the subject about whom we are talking is a strong one. Fine. And suppose when we use a passive voice, if we are not sure about the subject, fine, or if you want to display the object as someone strong or something strong, it is only then when we use the passive voice. Alright, so this is one condition. It is always advisable, or it is the thumb rule, that you use the active voice as much as possible. But if suppose you are the subject is vague, when the subject is vague, you are not sure about the subject or the agent or the doer of the action. Fine, when the subject is vague, in such cases you can use the passive voice. In such cases, use the passive voice. Fine. Alright. Now I'll just give an example, then it will become clear. Suppose I'll write a sentence first in the active voice, then I'll change it to the passive voice. The dog chased the squirrel. Fine. So this sentence is in the what? It is in the active voice. Fine. It is in the active voice. How we'll understand? See, simple. The dog, the subject, chased is the verb or the action. The squirrel is the object. Now suppose I want to change it to the passive voice. Is there any need to change it to the passive voice? Yes. If you are trying to if you are trying to show the prominence of the squirrel or the object, fine. In any sentence, when we are trying to show the prominence of the object, if and when, you can then change it to the passive voice, because you are more interested in showing the character of the squirrel, or you are more interested in defining the character of the squirrel. Then you can change it to the passive voice. So in the passive voice, how will we write it? We'll write the squirrel was chased by the dog. The meaning remains the same. We are just doing what? We are adding the preposition. This is the auxiliary verb or a helping verb, the to be verb. So by doing that, we are changing the position of the subject and the object. We are interchanging, and then this becomes the passive voice. Fine. So always remember, it is always advisable, or it is the thumb rule, that we use the active voice more frequently. It is better. It makes the sentence stronger. But in case you want to make the object prominence, or your writing or your sentence is focusing on the object, then in such case you can write in the passive voice. Otherwise, it's better not to use the passive voice. Fine. All right. All right. Now we remember one thing. All right. It is very, very interesting that only transitive verbs can be used in the passive voice. Why? Remember, only transitive verbs can be used in the passive voice. It means what? That you cannot use intransitive verbs in the passive voice. Why? Now see, what is a transitive verb? You know, a transitive verb is a verb which the action of which is transitioned or changed from the doer to the object, isn't it? When in a sentence the action done by the doer or the subject is transformed, transitioned or changed to the doer, then such a verb is called a transition verb. That means in a subject, an object has to be in a sentence. I mean, in a sentence, an object has to be there, and in an object is present only where, a sentence consisting of a transitive verb. In an intransitive verb or an intransitive verb sentence consisting of an intransitive verb, it is not necessary that object has to be there, isn't it? Suppose I write this is an example, all right? Suppose I write the baby laughs. Simply I am talking about the action of the baby. Subject, action. There is no object here. So how are you going to change it to, this is the active voice, isn't it? The baby laughs. Subject is there and action is there, or the verb is there. So if we want to change it to the passive voice, how will you change it? Will we say the laugh was loved by the baby? I think it is sounding ridiculous, isn't it? It is not possible, or it is illogical. We cannot say. Such a sentence cannot be made. It is not correct. It is incorrect. The laugh was loved by the baby. So that way you cannot change it into a passive voice, because it doesn't make any sense. Hence it is said only transitive verbs can be used in the passive voice, because they have objects. They have objects, isn't it? The sentences which have transitive verbs, they also have objects, and it is necessary that to change a sentence from a passive active voice to a passive voice, you have to have an object, isn't it? Where the position of the subject and object are interchanged, isn't it? Just we had seen in the previous sentence, the dog chased the squirrel was chased by the dog. So the dog is the subject, chased is the verb, and squirrel is the object, isn't it? So we can change it from the active to the passive voice. But in a sentence, when we do not have an object, we cannot change it to the active voice to the passive voice. And such sentences are what? They are intransitive, isn't it, in nature, where there is no object. I hope it is clear. And one more thing I have already mentioned is what? The passive voice is preferred when the active form would involve the use of an indefinite or vague noun or pronoun, isn't it? Like suppose in the active form we are using the subject as somebody, then say they, people, etc., isn't it? So these subjects are what? These subjects are vague or indefinite, isn't it? We are not talking about any definite noun or pronoun. So in such cases we can use the passive voice. It is generally preferred, isn't it? Because we are not talking about the subject clearly. So this is about active and passive voice. So suppose I want to give you an example. So I can write, say, in the passive, first a sentence in the passive voice. If I write passive, suppose my pen has been stolen. Fine. So see here, I have written my pen has been stolen. By whom? It is not clear, isn't it? This is in the passive voice. My pen has been stolen. Who has stolen it? It can be anyone. So if we want to change it, what will be the active form of this sentence? It will be what? Somebody has stolen my pen. Somebody, or you can write they have stolen my pen, or it can be like that, something which is vague, alright, not definite. Somebody has stolen my pen. So in such cases you can write the passive voice, or you can use the passive voice, or the use of the passive voice is preferable because the subject is vague or indefinite. Fine. So that will be all for today, and I'll try in the next class to do some some exercises on passive and active voices. Fine. So thank you.